Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I was thinking about what it means to tell a story for me or to create one. And I was thinking how much it says kind of about me and about ways in which I did things, such as celebrate Christmas or not. But anyway, here goes. In 1959, in November, I was 8 years old. And my mother and father took my brother and I to Aunt Kitty and Uncle Ruby's in the Bronx. And the reason for the trip was the monthly get-together of the Weinstein family circle. And the Weinstein family circle was kind of a family, kind of labor, it had labor roots. But the real job of the family circle was to take care of the grave plots for the family. That was it. And everything else was eating and socializing. My Uncle Mike was there. And Mike, he was smoking a cigar and he had this huge diamond pinky ring on. And I swear I'd never seen something cooler in my life. So Mike, to know a little bit more about him, he was 6'4". He had worked in the shipyards as a riveter in World War I until his eyesight started to fail. They didn't wear protective goggles in those days. And Mike then went from riveting to working with his childhood friends from the Lower East Side. And these were the guys who later became known as Murder Incorporated. So Mike had a certain cachet to me. And the pinky ring had a lot of cachet. Now, I have to tell you, in looking back on it, I think Jewish kids, or at least I, always had the sense that I really wanted to be a tough guy. And part of it was that we were told that we needed to be intellectuals by our families. And there was a whole thing about the war and how much we fought in the war, and the whole thing maybe with the Warsaw Ghetto was, you know, what we could look at. But being feisty was not necessarily in the character that I was kind of brought up to be. So I wanted to be a tough guy. And as we were coming home from the Weinstein family circle, it was 6 weeks till Christmas, and my mother said, "What do you want?" And I said, "Well, I want a pinky ring." And she went crazy. She said, "You're not going to be a thug. I'm not going to raise my child to be a hoodlum. You're not going to be a starker," which in Yiddish means kind of tough guy. So, okay, it looked like the pinky ring was out. Their role models were Albert Einstein, Jonas Salk. Mine were gangsters. So, anyway, Santa Claus came early, but he didn't come down the chimney. He came to me on the back of my new Superman comic book. There was a full-page ad, and on the top of the ad, it screamed, "Pinky ring, free pinky ring, initials engraved, 100% nickel." It said a lot of other things, but truthfully, I didn't read any of them. And I filled out the form, I sent it back, I mailed it to the Wilson Chemical Company of St. Louis, Missouri. Now, a couple of weeks passed, and it was early December, and I was home for lunch. My mother and father worked. My father was a postman, my mom was a teacher, and they employed a wonderful woman named Georgiana T. Grant. And Georgia she sort of helped my brother and I get through childhood, and she also was taking care of the house. So there was lunch every day for me. I came home, and I had finished my lunch, and Georgia and I were watching television, as was our pattern after lunch. And a UPS truck drove up, and the driver brought up 4 packages. Now, there was 3 large ones and 1 small one, and the return address was St. Louis, Missouri. So I took the small one real fast and opened it up, and sure enough, there was my ring. Now, I have to tell you, that ring bore no resemblance to anything I saw on Uncle Mike's finger. It was cheap, it was plastic, it was junk. But, you know, I was like, well, okay, so I put it on. I mean, I was a stoic little guy, at least about that stuff, but I was disappointed, but I headed on back to school. Now, slipping the ring on was really an operative word, because I swear it was sized to fit Uncle Mike. And so I went back to school with this thing kind of bouncing on my finger. I came home in order to check out the other boxes after school. I opened the box, and I didn't know what to make of it. The box was filled with something called tins of cloverine salve. Cloverine salve was off-white, it was thick, it was greasy, it was poor man's Vaseline. And, but there was a letter inside it. There was like an informational brochure, one-pager. And what it said was it told little Willie Lomans how to move the product. And I read it, and it even had a holiday-based message that we could go to customers and tell them why cloverine salve was the perfect, thoughtful Christmas gift. So the nickel dropped. I realized that, in fact, I was soon to become a door-to-door salesman. So I picked up a couple of cans. I was pretty dutiful. I mean, I was really, I tried to do the right thing, kind of. And I went out and went up and down the block. I hit about 8 houses, and I didn't sell one can. Came back, put the cans in the remaining cans in the box, pushed the box to the back of the closet. And as I looked down, I realized the ring was not on my pinky. And that's right. What had happened was somewhere between the back door and the last house I knocked on, I lost my pinky ring. Life lessons were beginning to pile up all around me. So Christmas came and went, and I put the pinky ring fiasco behind me. Except it kind of came back that spring. One Saturday, my mother came up to me and said, quite casually, Leegee, do you know anything about the Wilson Chemical Company? And I said, oh. And she said, they wrote you a letter. And the letter said that they sent cases of cloverine salve to you, and they want their cloverine salve back, or they want $150. Could you tell me what that's about? And I said, well, sure. And I fessed up immediately. I told her about the advertisement in the comic book. I told her about the pinky ring. I told her about the boxes. I told her about my brief career as a salesman. And we pulled the boxes out, and she looked at them. And shockingly, she wasn't too upset. My father, on the other hand, was fascinated by the cloverine salve. So about a week goes by. And my mom says, you're not going to be getting any more letters from that company. And I said, really? I said, huh? Oh, why? And she said, because I wrote them. And she said, I told them that they should be ashamed of themselves for taking advantage of a little boy. I told them that their letter had upset you so much that you could not sleep anymore, and I had to take you to a psychiatrist. And he said you needed therapy. And I told them that we were considering a lawsuit. Now, I know this is kind of like, oh my God, this is so American and horrible. But this was my mother's genius. You had to really know her to understand her kind of piranha-like notions in moments like this. She'd take on anybody. So the coup de grace, she said, was, she told me their lawyer called, and he apologized and told her she could keep the salve. Now, the Wilson Chemical Company continued in operation for a couple more years till they were put out of business by the U.S. Postal Service. They were found guilty of exploiting poor, rural children, unlike yours truly, by promising them fantastic prizes in exchange for their labor. But I don't want this story to be throwing the baby out with the bathwater, because in truth, the cloverine salve was the most incredible product to ever enter our home. My father considered it the greatest Christmas gift he ever got. He rubbed it on every part of his body that could possibly have a rash. It was the old man's weapon in the unending battle against athletic itch. And it was the gift that kept on giving, because I was in junior high school before he worked his way through those boxes.